And welcome everyone to this 42nd Academy, and the second one we run in our new series, the scripting problem of the month. A very short reminder what this series exactly is. We aim to run this 9 to 10 times per year. Sessions that will take 30 to 60 minutes. This one took the full 60 minutes yesterday, so it will probably be not less shorter today. We do one topic per session, a topic that a scripting problem that we see often appearing in the help desk. Basic ODA knowledge is required. So for instance, I will not be explaining how to set random and rotation commands. I expect that to be known. I will be talking today more about the consequences of using these commands. If you have a suggestion for a topic, if there is one particular scripting issue that you would like to have an in-depth dive in, please send that suggestion to the help desk and we will add that to the list. So that's for the introduction for the scripting problem of the month. Now, today, we're going to talk about randomization. We will take a look at why you should randomize, what you can randomize, the types of randomizations that are available general and the specific types available within Enfield. Then I think the main reason why we want to run this topic, which randomization you should use, and more importantly, under what conditions you should not use particular types of randomizations. Then we take a look at the randomization options, how you can make manual or weighted randomizations. And lastly, we take a look at the randomization expression that we have in Enfield, where you can simply draw a random number. And as always, we'll end with questions. Let's get into this. Now, why you should randomize? Basically, you should randomize to prevent order bias. Now, what is order bias? That is not only about people getting tired if you make a very long list so they pay less attention at the end of that list. It's also when, for instance, you ask for brand awareness, the chance is higher that brands are recognized further down the line than the brands that are on top on that line. Equally, when you ask for preferences, the first brands in that list and very often function as a benchmark for which all other brands are compared. And all of that results in that the order in which you present the list influences the results. And the way to combat that is by making sure that no one sees the same order. So you randomize the order. So you know for sure that each order is used, has an equally chance of being shown. So that's the reason why we randomize. Now, what can you randomize in Enfield? You can randomize code questions, you can randomize repeat loops, and you can randomize matrix blocks. Those are the ones that you can randomize by simply adding a command to these Enfield questions. So those are the three that you can randomize. The types of randomizations. There are three sorts of general randomizations. You can random things, completely randomize things. That is the first one that you see here. The Odin command for that is *random, and it completely randomizes a list. This is a list of 9 numbers. It randomizes that list. So each number has an equal chance of being presented on each particular index of this list. Then we have the rotation command. The Enfield command for that is *rot, and a rotation command keeps the order, the original order, but it has a different starting point each time. So in this time here, you see this one rotated. It starts with 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then it comes from the beginning again. This is rotation. The way this is implemented in Enfield is that if you use a rotation command, then Enfield will choose a random starting point, and from that point onwards, it will create a list in the order, in the original order. And then we have an inversion command, and inversion simply means that you flip the order each time. So you start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 till 9, and then you start with 9 to 1, and then the next time you start with 1 and you start with 1 and 9 again. We have not implemented the inversion command in Enfield. It was implemented in NFS, the predecessor of Enfield, but it hardly was used there. So we have not implemented this in Enfield. Then one thing to remember, if you look at a question like this one, and there is a random command on this, what will happen if this starts to be randomized is that first the engine or Enfield will look at what brands need to be displayed, even if there is a control statement here. There, it will first filter out those brands, and then it will randomize what is left. In a repeat loop, this is different because there is no clear connection between what the driver is of that repeat loop. So there is no clear indication what actually the brands are. So what happens in a repeat loop will take the repeat counter here. This one is randomized, and then the repeat is run, and only during the execution of the repeat things are skipped. And that is still part of that randomized list. Why am I explaining this? As long as you are using random, this is not a problem. But as we will see later onwards, there are some issues here if this is a rotation. Then, which rotation not to use? As I said previously, this is the main reason why we want to run this academy. To make you aware of some of the pitfalls of using some rotation options in combinations with certain Enfield constructs. Let me start with a bit of a historical overview. In market research, we now all use computers to run market research, so we can easily randomize things, but that has not always been the case. Market research started as on this picture, on pen and paper, with simply pen and paper surveys and interviews, visiting other people, and then running down a survey on pen and paper. And it is very difficult to completely randomize a list then. So what we historically did do in market research is that we randomize those lists. You get you choose a random starting point, and from that point onwards, you work down that list. This has become such commonplace in market research that in market research we very often use the term rotation when we not literally mean the technical term rotation, but just as a shorthand for a randomization. Keep this in mind if you see a survey that is calling for rotation, that what they actually might mean is a straight randomization. So, and now for the demo where we will actually show why you should be careful using some of those constructs. Let me get to, I have prepared a few scripts The first one I will run in the developer, and I will run the first one in the developer only, which is this one, because to show the effect for some of the randomizations, I need very large repeats to actually show the results of these randomizations, repeats of 10,000, and you should not run that in Enfield proper. That is a way too high load on the system to have multiple repeats of 10,000 here. So I'm going to run this one in the developer, but it's the same if you would actually run this in Enfield. So what I will do here, I start a repeat of 10,000. Within that repeat, I have a random repeat of 10. And what I do in that random repeat, I take note of the first iteration, the first random iteration. I count that, and then I write down how many times a iteration was used, a iteration number was used first. So let's run this. Start. So we'll start with randomizing 10 items, and we repeat this 10,000 times. And as you can see here, if we then list the numbers, how many times a starting point was used, we can see they all have roughly 10% chance of being chosen, which is exactly what we would expect because there are 10 items. So yeah, they should have a 10% chance of being chosen. None of them are exactly 1,000. That wouldn't be random, but they are all pretty close to 1,000. So yeah, they have a 10% chance of being chosen. Next one, we do the same, but this time we do not randomize the repeat, we rotate the repeat. So let's take a look at that one. Here, this is the same, but then rotation, and it's pretty much the same. We still have a 1,000% chance. We still have 10% chance that it starts with any number. So again, this looks fine. Then next one that we do is, again, we have, well, next one, let's first do actually the next step. And here we have a question where we actually say, okay, pick 5 items, and these 5 items are the items that we will be using for the next randomizations. So let's pick 5, 1, 2, 3, 5, and 10. We don't need to remember which one. It will be very clear once we start running is which ones that we have skipped. So we have picked 5 items, and then in the next one, we again run the same repeat, 10 random, but this time we control them on the 5 items that we actually picked here. So let's do that, run the repeat. And now you see the 5 items that we did not pick are skipped. And that immediately has as consequence that the 5 remaining items now have a 20% chance of being chosen, which is, again, what you would expect. There are only 5 items from 10. So yeah, they should have a 20% chance of being chosen now. Okay. Now, last thing, we are again doing the same, but this time instead of a randomization, we do a rotation. We control it on the same question. So let's do that. And here we see that the results are different. And this is the one thing where I was talking about previously. This is a consequence of using a rotation on a repeat where you do not display everything in that repeat. Because remember what happens, it starts a random starting point here. And from that point onwards, it starts rotating. And if it doesn't have to display that random starting point, it simply moves on to the next one. So this one, the first one, has a 10% chance of being chosen because there are still 10 items. So yeah, look, this is 10%. This has a 10% chance, which is about right. This has a 10% chance, which is right for number 3. 4 has a 10% chance, but 4 is not actually displayed, so it moves on to the next one, 5, which also has a 10% chance. And that results in a total chance of 20% that 5 is actually chosen first. And then it really gets worse. We have 10% here, 10% here, 10% here, 10% here, plus this one, resulting in a 50% chance that this will actually start with 5. And that can no longer be called a randomized rotation if it starts 50% of the time with 5. This isn't always a problem. It depends a bit on what your control exactly is. If there is no pattern whatsoever in that control, you shouldn't worry about this. But in practice, there will be a pattern in most of those controls. Because what are those controls? Those controls are brands people know or brands people use, or the most popular brands. And not all brands are equally well known. Not all brands are equally well liked. So there will be a pattern in most of those controls, and that will result in a skewed rotation. So whenever you see a repeat, or for that matter, a matrix where a rotation is used and a control is used, you should take a step back and think, okay, do we really need a rotation on this, or should it be randomized? And if a rotation is really needed, you should make a manual randomization. We will talk about that later, what that precisely is. One last thing to remember here. We now talk about rotations with a control, but the same will happen if you use a very large list with a gap. So if you use a list where you have items 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 99 for a don't know, and you start repeating that 99 times, the chances that it will start with 1 are very big, because there is a very large gap between the last real code and the first real code. So also, if you use a list with a very large gap, and you use a rotation on a repeat or a matrix, be careful. Let me stress again, this is only true for repeats and matrix. This is not a problem if you would be using a question only. So this is one. Now we have another point that you should be aware of when using rotations. I need to open another survey for that. Open another survey. Sorry. And that is rotated matrix basic. What we're basically doing here is we have a brand list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But as you can see, the code numbers do not actually match this. The code numbers are a bit boggled. If this is a question, this isn't a problem, because what the question is actually randomizing are the labels, not the code numbers. They're randomizing the labels. So the rotation of these labels will go fine in a question. But again, in a repeat, or in this case, a matrix, what is being actually rotated are the numbers. So that will start rotating these numbers, and that will not result in this being rotated on brand number. It will be rotated on code number. Now, to show this, I will actually go to manager, and it's the rotated matrix basic. So let's set this up, open the setup, go to copy live link, and then take a look at this. Now, the first one will be the rotated codes, and as you can see, the rotation is fine. It actually is starting with 1 because it shows on default random to start with 1, and the rotation is fine. It's at least in order. Now the next step will be the matrix, and here the rotation is, as you can see, off. It starts with 2, then 3, that is fine, but then it skips to 1, 4, 6. This rotation is actually off. At least it's off when looking at the labels, because what it is really rotating, if we look at the actual survey, and if you see what it is rotating, it starts with brand 2. If we look at brand 2, that is 5. So the next what will be rotated is 6, which is indeed 3, and then the next one will be 1, which is indeed brand 1. So it's actually rotating the code numbers, which is to be expected, but that is probably not what you want here. You want it to rotate from the brand numbers. The only way to solve this is either by renumbering your list, and if that is not possible, again, a manual rotation is needed to make sure that this is rotated properly. So those are the 2 things that we want you to be aware of. So to recap, keep in mind, in market research, we use the term rotation often in a more general meaning than the technical term rotation. Other thing to remember, random is better to prevent order bias than rotation. You really should have a reason why it should be rotation. If you haven't, it should be random, because random is better to prevent order bias, because you are randomizing more things than you are doing in a rotation. Rotation should be carefully looked at if it is used in a repeat loop in combination with a control. Rotation should always be carefully looked at when it is used in a matrix block, because a matrix block always has a control. Rotation should be carefully looked at when it is used in repeat or matrix if the driver list has large gaps or any gap. And finally, what we saw in the last example, rotation should not be used on a repeat or matrix if the code numbers are not in the same rotation order as the code labels. Any questions at this point, Art?
No, no questions so far, Frank.
Okay, then let's skip to the next one. Randomization options. We'll immediately go in the demo to show you the options. You will hopefully know most of these options, but just simply want to go through them to point out some of the consequences of these options. So let's go to the manager again. List. Let's start with the no-con and the stop random. Let's take a look at these. So we'll start with a random list of 10. This is a clear random list. We can open the view file belonging with this, which is this one. No, this is not the rand group. Sorry. This is the no-con stop random. So we simply have a random command with no option whatsoever, and it is randomizing everything. So next one. We'll have placed a no-con on 10. So now 10 is being exempt from a randomization, which means it remains at the position where it is, which is the last position. In the script, it Simple. We simply have a no-con on that position. Now, one thing to be aware of this no-con command, it does not simply stop the randomization on the code that you have placed it. It actually stops randomization from that point onwards. So now we do not have that no-con. We do not have that no command on 10. We have the no-con on 7. And as you can see, the first 6 are randomized, but from 7 onwards, the randomization is stopped. So that is the first thing to be aware of this no-con command. That stops randomization from that point onwards. And then the other thing, no-con does not only stop randomization, it actually disables any control that you have placed on the survey. So if we now choose to say, pick the codes that we want to show in the next question. So let's do this one and let's do these two. We do not pick 7. And if we then go to the next question, you actually see 7 is still shown because there is a no-con command on 7, which means it's not only exempt from randomization, it's also exempt from the control command we put on this one. We have an option for this if this is not wanted, and that option is stop random, and that is exactly spelled that way too. Here we have stop random. So instead of a no-con, I use a stop random. I use the same control command as previous. And if I now do this, you will actually see that 7 is now indeed not shown because this time we do execute the control command. Still, randomization is stopped from 7 onwards, so 9 and 10 are not randomized. Okay, this is for the no-con stop random. Then, other option that we have is the group command, where you can group codes together to make sure that they are randomized within that group. Sounds a bit abstract, so let's open up the survey I prepared for this, which is, so we do the favorites, which is the random group. This one, setup. Live link. Let's start the survey. So this is the list that I'm using for this one. It's a list of 4 different brands, brand A, B, C, and D, and they all have different models. Brand A has 3 different models, B has 5 different models, etc., etc. So this is the brand. Now we could simply randomize this by putting a randomization on this question as we have seen before, but that will result in this, where everything is randomized, including the brands, and this would probably be very confusing for a respondent to look up a model because it first needs to look up the brand, and those brands are completely scanned, and then the model. So it's better if we make sure that we keep those brands together. Now, a very simple way to do that is by adding a group command to each of these brands. Now, let's take a look at the script to see how we've done this. And this is the randomized group. So we are already at this point here in the survey. You simply put a star group command here, and it will group these commands, and it will group these items together, and it will only randomize within those groups, as you can see. But this is probably still not really what we want, because we are not randomizing the brands now. We are only randomizing the models within the brands now. To randomize the brands too, we can simply add star group to the question. If you take a look at it, that's all I've done here. I've added the star group, and that then randomizes the brands too. So this is a very easy way to randomize groups and brands. One disadvantage here. Oh no, let's first look at this one. Another option is that you are actually using heading. And if you are using heading, as you can see, you can actually add a heading, and a heading also works as an implicit group. So you do not have to add star group if you use a heading. You see star group is added here, but that is done by if you fix the positions in a questionnaire and you use heading, that option will then actually add group, but you do not have to do that manual. Each heading is already an implicit group. So that's one thing. Instead of groups, you could use headings. And then one thing to remember. If we add a no-con category, so none of these, a special category, this is also considered a group, and it is also randomized together with the other groups. So now none of these is actually appearing in the middle of the list, which is almost certainly not what we want. We want it to appear at the bottom of the list. There's not an easy way to make that happen. A very simple way would be if we actually make this none of these into a button, which is not that strange because very often we want those special codes as a button. Then it will simply appear as a button, and buttons are not randomized. You do not get a randomized label into a button. So that will always be a button. So that is a very simple way to make sure that your special codes aren't randomized. If it needs to be in the list, you will need to make a manual randomization to make sure that this appears last on the list. Again, we will take a look at that shortly, how to do this. Then last thing, what if I use a random? What if I don't use a random but a rotate? So a rot option on that survey. So instead of star random, I use star rot, and everything else is the same. Then it will actually start rotating. It rotates the models, and it will also rotate the brands. It doesn't, yeah, it actually started with A, but it will also rotate the brands. So rotate will work the same in groups, only it will start rotating. Sorry. So for the groups, let's take a look at the last option, and the last option we have is the order command. The order command is something you would use if you have a random list of 10 like this one. Let's take a good look at the first three, 653, so 653. And if I then want to say, I want to use this random order again, that is useful because you don't want to confuse your respondents by using a different random order for the same brand list multiple times in your survey. It's good to use the same random order once you set that once. That can be very easily achieved by using order. Again, 653, those are the 3 start points for that's it. So I'm using the same order here, and indeed 653. It's the same order as in the previous one. This is achieved by simply adding order queue, the command star order, and then Q1, which is the question. R means use the same random order as in Q1. One other thing that you can use this function for, and that is to actually find out what was actually displayed at which random position. So let's again make sure 6 is the first one. And if I move to the next one, you will actually see, yeah, This was the code in the first position 6, and I found that out by simply running this expression, which is QID, the question ID, random, and then the I is the position I'm after. So this time would have had here Q2, which is this position, R, first position, and then it returns 6 because 6 was the one that was shown at this position. To be complete, you can also use the order command, not only for randomized question, but also to display questions in the order they were mentioned. And you can use this expression to actually find out what was mentioned first or second. Not go into details of that because this is about randomization. So those are the randomized options we have on questions. Let's return to the show. So to recap, there are options to stop randomization, no con and stop random. There are options to group codes, groups and a heading. A group on a question will randomize the groups. Order, question ID, random can be used to reuse a previous random or rotated order in the same interview. Question ID, random, and then the position will return the code that was shown on which randomized position. And then let's take a look at the manual randomization. Create a manual randomization. What you do is you create an array. You fill that array with the desired randomization, and then that can either be code numbers or code labels. But remember, if you use code labels, you can only use that on a question. Question will go fine, but remember, repeats and matrix go on code numbers, so you can only use numbers on these. And then you use the command we already see in order to use the manual randomization, and that is simply star order and then the name of the array in which you have stored the order you want. So let's take a look at a few that I prepared. Again, let's take a look in the manager again, and let's start with the group. Shown you the group, and this one, where you saw that if we add a none of these and we still want to group that, the none of these is randomized within that group too. Now, what we now want to do is we want to prevent that happening. I'm using properties here to do this. You could do this using only randomization loops and not using properties, but that would be very awkward because not all brands have the same number of models. So you will need to start controlling those repeats depending on what brand that is and what number that is. That is all getting to be very error prone. So the easiest way to actually do this is make sure that you can communicate to the script which brand is what, and you do that by using properties. So I'm using properties here, and what we do here is we start a repeat of 4, a random repeat of 4, where we choose which brand we will be doing. Then within that repeat, I start a repeat of 20, and I simply check does the property match the brand that we have chosen in the outer repeat, and if so, I store the code into the array index that I want to use, and then we raise the index array. I'm using 20 here, which is not really needed because we only have 13 brands, so I could put this at 13 too. But as soon as I would add a brand, then I will need to raise that repeat here. So to make this a little bit future-proof, I slightly raised the repeat that I need here. That's a wise thing to do. Do be careful. Be reasonable if you use a bigger repeat. Do not start using a repeat of 100 here, because you only have 13 brands. Why you should reserve for 83 more brands if you start with 30. Make a reasonable guess how many there are, and keep your repeats to a reasonable number here. So I'm using 20 here. And then I have a random repeat with the 13 brands. And you might say, okay, but this was about none of these, and we are not adding none of these anywhere here. That is true. That is a specific feature of the order. What the order does, if you display an order from an array, it will display all codes in the order as mentioned in the array. And if there then still are codes left, it will start adding these in order to the end of the list. So in this case, I do not have to add none of these because I want to have that added to the end of the list. I simply skip it. And that way, if I add extra bands, I do not have to worry that the none of these, that I have to replace the none of these two if I simply make sure that the none of these is not added to the list. That will be added to the end of the list. Let's actually see if this works. So go to, did we already choose the one that we want? It's the random group using properties. That's the one. Yeah. Copy the live link. So here we have the list. As you can see, the brands are randomized, the models are randomized, and the none of these is added to the end of the list. So yeah, the script works. So that is the one thing. Then the other thing that we take a look at, that was that matrix where the codes did not match the labels, the code numbers did not match the labels. And then that matrix was rotated in the wrong way. Also prepared a script to prepare that. So let's open that script. And switch to that script, and that would be the rotated matrix. So this was the problem. We have a brand list in order, but it does not match the code numbers. Again, I'm using properties here because that is the easiest way to simply do this. You have to somehow get the information to the script that this is the order that we want to use, and I'm using properties to do that. First, we run a matrix where we actually see, to just remind everyone, okay, this is the option that we do not want to do. And then here is where I start building the manual repeat. So what we do, we choose a random position. I use a expression for this, which I will show later how this exactly works. And that chooses a random starting position from 6. That is happening here. And I put the index on 1. And then I simply start repeating where I check if the property is matching the position that we want. And then I start adding the code number. And then finally, we display it in that order. Now let's check on the list. Actually, let's end this one. Let's run this. So that would be the rotated matrix setup. Copy the live link. Okay, this is the rotated question. Codes are not in rotation order. This is the one where we did not did this correctly. So, okay, this is the question, and the question is fine because the question is only showing, because the question is actually rotating the labels. Okay, this is the matrix. The matrix is not okay because the matrix is actually rotating the code numbers and they do not match the code. And this is where we use this is where we use the rotation that we build ourselves. And here you see brand 5, 6, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, this rotation is fine. So this is how you would build a manual rotation. Okay. I think we probably have some time left to do another one, but let's first take a look at the expression before we do another one. Let's first actually finish what we want to do. Slideshow, current slide. So manual rotation, we're taking a look at now. Randomization expression. There is an expression where you can draw a random number. The expression is run x, or x is a number, and that will return a random number between 0 and x. So rand2 will randomly return either 0 or 1. Remember, this is an expression, so this needs to be between square brackets. Any questions at this point?
Yes, there were a couple of questions. One was about the randomization of brands, which you have shown in a demo already, so that was covered. There's another one that another person spotted the random survey block example.
Yeah, that's
the queue.
Yeah. If we have time left, I will go through that one.
Yeah, I would do that. Yeah.
But let's first, are there any other questions?
No, those were the questions. Yeah.
Okay, then let's go to the randomization box. Okay. That is indeed something different in the sense that that is not a randomization on questions. What we want to do here, and let's open up the, first let me open up the oops, survey random blocks, this one. So what we have here is a survey. It has 4 question blocks, an introduction and an outro. So 6 blocks in total. The introduction we always want to have first. The outro should be last, and then we have 4 blocks in between. And those 4 blocks should be run in random order. If this is a bit confusing, let me very quickly run the script. Oh, this one I forgot to do. No, let's skip it for now because it's going to be. Why is this? Okay. Okay. Let's go back. Let's do the randomized survey blocks setup and then copy live link. So once we run this, it will be very clear what it exactly does. So as said, this is a survey with four with 4 different blocks, each block presented in random order. This is the introduction. So the introduction is always first. Then this is the first block. It's block A, and it's run as the first block of this survey. Okay. Second question of block A, last question of block A. So we should now move to a different block. Hopefully that's not B. No, it's C. So it's indeed now randomly moving to the next block. Block 3 has 4 questions. Then we run block B. Block B is run as the third block of this interview. And then we only have block D left, which would then be run as the fourth block of this interview. And once this one is run, second question of this question, last question, and then we should skip to the outro of this question, the last question of this survey, and the survey is done. Now, how is this done? How is this scripted? There are several ways how you could script this. This is just the way I would prefer to script this. We'll start with the introduction, and we always display this first, so I can simply put this on top. Then I need to fill the random order. What I do is I start a repeat of 4 random repeat, and I simply put in the iteration numbers in a array. So that would randomly fill 1, 2, 3, 4 in that array. Then I put the outro, that's number 5. I also push that into the block order as the last one. I put the index of the block order to 1, and then I simply say go to the question ID in the block order 1. And each block, as you can see, starts with a question ID. So if this would be 1, it would jump to this point. If it would be 2, it would jump to this point. And then at the end of each block, I simply raise the index 1 and I jump to the next block. And because the outro is put in last, it will always jump to the outro as last. So that's the introduction. That's a block survey. We have 5 minutes left, so let me very quickly, because I saw I skipped to something in the matrix example. Let me. Oops. Why? This was the one I wanted for the rotated matrix. Live link. I skipped to a point that I do want to make here. Again, this is the rotated question. The rotation is correct because this is a question. This is the matrix, which is off because it's rotating the branch. And we're using a manual rotation, and this time the rotation is correct. Now, this is the same with a large gap. We have a large gap in that sign. And again, the rotation is off. So, or at least it's showing the one with the large gap. It prefers to show that one as first. Here we have corrected that. And the way that is done is rotated matrix. That is very simply done by raising the repeat. The rotation, it's now based, the gap here is that there is actually a brand 400, and this is done by simply raising the repeat to 400. But then, if you paid attention and you looked at the order command, you might also say, well, I do not need all of this because I actually have shown the correct rotation here. So I could use that correct rotation here in that matrix. And indeed, you would be right, that would work. So if we do that one, you would actually see, yeah, that rotation would work because we're using the same rotation order as in that question. But this only works, you can only show an order, a random order from a question if that question was actually shown. So you cannot use that from a dummy question. And most of the time, the matrix drivers are dummy questions. So in this time, that would work, and that would be a far better idea than starting to write all sorts of repeats to correct this. But in most cases, you probably cannot reuse an order because you haven't shown that question. That question is a dummy question. Okay, that was the thing that I skipped from the matrix example that I still wanted to say. Any last questions, Art?
Yes, there's a question about whether templates have any effect on the randomness result or running effects of the
They shouldn't. They shouldn't.
No. Okay.
If they have, that's an error in the template.
Okay. And there was some question about, yes, so somebody feels that a safer way to do a block randomization, but I think that's better discussed after the session.
As I said, this is just one way. There are other ways to do a block randomization. Yeah.
Okay. No, those were the questions, Frank.
Yeah. Okay. Final remarks. A recording of this session will be available later this week. We will also share the example scripts with that. Reminder, if you have a suggestion for a topic, please write to your help desk and we will add that to the list. Next Academy scripting problem of the month will be in October. And as it looks now, we will probably be talking about the new star request command in October. That's it. Thank you for your attention. Talk to you next month.
Thank you all for joining. Bye-bye.